This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 19th of July, 2025. Hello, I'm Georgina Godwin, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. This is Monocle on Saturday. Coming up on today's programme, we'll have a look through the week's news and culture with journalist and Monocle Radio regular politics commentator Vincent McAviney. And we turn to the world of publishing with an introduction to a new independent house called Firefinch. That's all ahead here on Monocle on Saturday. First, though, here's the news. Former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been indicted again on charges including abuse of authority, obstruction of rights and interfering with legal proceedings, all tied to his December 2024 martial law declaration. Yoon, who was impeached and removed from office earlier this year, remains in custody as prosecutors pursue charges that could carry a sentence of life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Israel and Syria have agreed to a US-brokered ceasefire after more than 300 people were killed in sectarian clashes in Sweden. In a rare move, Israel is allowing Syrian government troops limited access to the area for 48 hours to restore order, following intense pressure from Turkey, Jordan and Washington. Donald Trump is suing Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal's parent company for $10 billion, claiming defamation over an article that alleged he sent a lewd birthday note to Jeffrey Epstein, an allegation he insists is fake. At the same time, Trump has ordered the release of Epstein-related grand jury testimony, saying the files are of public interest. And North Korea has abruptly barred foreigners from its newly opened Wonsan Karma resort, despite promoting it as a showpiece for international tourism. The ban was announced just days after Russian visitors began arriving and as Moscow prepares to launch direct flights to Pyongyang. And that's your Monocle Radio News. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Saturday. I'm Georgina Godwin and I'm joined in the studio by Vincent McAviney. Of course, you all know him well. He's a regular on these programmes and across many other channels too. Finny, what about this North Korea thing? Did the Russians just behave really badly when they got there, do you think?
I mean, if you've ever seen Russians in European resorts, but when they could go to them or ski resorts, yeah, their behaviour was often pretty bad. So
I mean, I have to say, I came across a lot in Bali and in Sri Lanka and places like that where I was recently, and they had a whole kind of enclave.
Yeah, they really take over. You see that in ski resorts, and still the ones that can get to European ski resorts, they sort of like to take over bars and kind of not interested in kind of conversing with anyone else and can be quite standoffish.
Although we're generalising horribly. I'm about to interview.
And this is incredible. I mean, you've got, imagine a very closed North Korean population going to a water park and seeing Russians who, probably are used to kind of drinking and sort of partying in a way that would just be so alien to North Koreans. Yeah.
I've got a couple of Russian journalists coming in for an interview right after this show. And I have to say they are so not that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of Russians that aren't like that. But I mean, it's hard to think who would go on holiday there. I mean, I think I might actually. I mean, not for the holiday, but for the experience.
I think it would be fascinating. I mean, a decade ago, I went to Cuba just after Obama announced that then when they sort of re-established links, which have, obviously that's all now fallen away under the Trump years. But I wanted to go and see just this kind of pocket world that existed. And it was a fascinating trip to go and see what my expectations were versus the realities, the things that, were little acts of rebellion. They had this incredible in Cuba internet that they had made themselves with physical cables that went house to house, and they were big into file sharing. They would trade PDFs of newspapers. You heard sort of Western music, so there were ways of subterfuge. But I think it just would be fascinating to go to North Korea to just see that level of control, because anything you watch, it is kind of a beyond belief. And they've tried. I mean, they dabbled recently, and I think they got surprised. They did a marathon, which I think ended in the main stadium in Pyongyang, and lots of Western runners went. And I think they couldn't believe how easily they were all filming with things like GoPros, and I think they slightly lost control of being able to control the narrative these days when you don't have big TV cameras and crews.
Yeah.
And then they pulled back again from having people come to run that race.
When you were in Cuba, did you go on the Hershey train?
No, I didn't.
It's fantastic. It goes to the old Hershey factory, but it's like this train from, I don't know, pre-1950.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. It's just the most extraordinary experience. And I have to tell you, one thing that really, really enhanced my experience of Cuba was this book called Dirty Havana Trilogy. It's by an author called Pedro Juan Gutierrez, and it's about ordinary people in Cuba, because normally, you're reading, I don't know, Graham Greene or whatever. It's, that it doesn't reflect those little acts of rebellion as you're talking about. And he's talking about it he writes about it as this kind of poor Cuban living there and what they're doing and how they get by. And it's just the most fantastic book. And it just completely enhanced my whole kind of everything about being in Cuba. I was now seeing it not through tourist eyes, but through his eyes.
Yeah. And you do stay with families. That's what
exactly.
You do these family stays.
Yeah.
You do think, though, that they are feeling, a bit monitored perhaps, but it is really interesting to speak to ordinary people. I always remember, got in this obviously amazing old cab from the airport, this old 1950s, 60s car, so well maintained. It had a very modern radio though, and it had a USB stick plugged in, and it was playing Adele, and it was her new album at the time. And I started speaking to the driver, and he just said, one day they will build a statue in Cuba to the USB stick, because it's how we've connected with the world. Just a small innocuous thing that we use as a utility here. It's a lifeline. People, he said, would go to, when they could travel out, they would go with USB drives. They would download months of papers and magazines and music and movies, bring it in, plug it to this little sort of jerry-rigged internet, this Havana net that they'd made, and people would get access to all of this stuff, and it was all from the little USB drive.
That's extraordinary. What a wonderful story. Now, I know that not so long ago you were in New York, and when you were there, you went to an extraordinary live television experience. Yeah,
this is great, and you've only got, I think, now another 10 months to do this, so if you are going to New York, I'd really recommend it. CBS has owned the US network, which is sort of part of Paramount, has owned the Ed Sullivan Theatre on Broadway, just off Times Square, for decades, since the 1930s. It initially did radio programming there, and then since the early 1950s, in one form or another, it has done The Late Show. And this theatre is gorgeous. It's hosted different talent. It's currently the home of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. But the legacy of this theatre is amazing. I mean, in a way that we don't have here in the UK. I think France maybe has a bit more of a culture of it, of having these late night sort of talk shows. This was the theatre that the Beatles did their first US performance in. It's where anyone promoting anything in America goes to go on The Late Show. You get A-list talent, you get great bands. And Stephen Colbert has helmed the show for the last decade. And what you can do is you register on the day online, and then you just go along in the afternoon, you queue up, and it's potluck. They're going to record an episode. They'll probably have 2 or 3, A-list sports people or actors or whoever is in town to promote their thing. They'll have a guest band. So, when I was there, it was Nicole Kidman and an actor from Stranger Things. It was the band St. Vincent. But you go into this theatre, and if nothing else, you get a kind of warm-up comedian, and Stephen Colbert comes out himself. It is just fascinating to watch. And I'm someone that's worked in TV a long time. How you record a show like that was as fascinating as watching the guests being interviewed, and then watching it later and see how it edits together was really good. And it took about sort of 2 hours or so. They do it Monday to Thursday. I think if you go on Thursday, you get a double show because they pre-record Fridays as well. And it's just this amazing tradition, and it's completely free, and it was a really great experience. And Stephen Colbert clearly loves this show so much. He really engaged with the audience. He did a Q&A after the show as well. And very sadly, CBS, despite The Late Show with Colbert being the highest rated of these US talk shows, you've got others like Tonight with Jimmy Fallon, and you've got Jimmy Kimmel on ABC. CBS has pulled the plug.
Well, let's hear what Colbert had to say about it.
Before we start the show, I want to let you know something that I found out just last night. Next year will be our last season. The network will be ending The Late Show in May. And yeah, I share your feelings. It's not just the end of our show, but it's the end of The Late Show on CBS. I'm not being replaced. This is all just going away. I wish somebody else was getting it. And it's a job that I'm looking forward to doing with this usual gang of idiots for another 10 months.
It's extraordinary. And the fact is, as you say, it's an extremely popular show. I can't believe that it doesn't make money. And so what everybody is questioning are political reasons behind it. Give us the background.
Well, the New York Times has got great coverage, and you've got sort of people from the network trying to put out this narrative that it was loss-making, even though it had this, good ratings, although they, across the board, on these talk shows have fallen. But, I watch Colbert, pretty much day in, day out via YouTube. They clip up most of the show. It goes on there. His take has, though, been very different in the last decade. He, coming from the background that he did, which was on, initially The Daily Show and then The Colbert Report, he has been the sharpest political commentator in America for the past 2 decades, really, particularly the change in the Republican movement from the Bush era. And he has skewered them for that. And he has relentlessly gone after Trump in a way that kind of connects with people in a fashion that the news struggles to sometimes, because just reporting what is happening is not accurately, it's calling the weather, but not the climate, essentially. Yeah. He has been the great tracker of what Trump is doing to break norms. And the questions now coming from US politicians are, the timing of this sounds weird. As far, Donald Trump has repeatedly criticized these late night hosts for going after him. Last year, he singled out Colbert and saying CBS should cancel his show. And lo and behold, CBS, this network, which is part of Paramount, trying to do this big conglomerate deal with another company called Skydance. CBS settled a lawsuit, just as ABC, the network owned by Disney, has a lawsuit connected to its news division, the 60 Minutes program. Donald Trump falsely claiming that they had misedited an interview that Kamala Harris did in the campaign last year. CBS just wanted to settle, and so they paid Donald Trump $50 million in settlement. But then, lo and behold, 24 hours later, all of a sudden they nixed this show. Was this a condition of the corporate deal to get rid of this show in order for that to go through, that merger?
I just need to correct something I said earlier. I said that it was probably not losing money. In fact, it was racking up losses of millions, apparently.
Well, I mean, that's what they're saying now. I mean, I mean, the same article that you have. I mean, without really seeing the books, that there is, this is going to be up for real conjecture, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Colbert has called this thing a big fat bribe.
Yeah, he has himself. And what's really interesting is he is still tied into his contract, and there'll be certain things that he can and can't say about the network. He has been quite critical of the network at times, and sort of mocks the kind of old model of network TV. But it'll be really interesting when he's released from that contract what he actually says about the finances, whether they have in any way cooked the books in order to try and kind of show that that this wasn't working. Because what's remarkable is even up until I think 2-3 years ago, CBS had 2 of these shows every night. Colbert was then followed by another show called The Late Late Show, which had James Corden presenting it, which did really good traffic online, clips like Carpool Karaoke, all those kind of things. So, when you're looking at the online clips for a show like Colbert, which, do hundreds of thousands of views, that is, serious, probably ad revenue coming out of YouTube from that as well. So I really question this idea that it was actually losing money. For when you've got the asset that is probably paid off decades ago, the theatre, you are running a daily team Monday to Thursday, but it seems very strange. Yeah.
And the fact is, he's got 10 months. I really hope he uses that to just say what it is that he needs to say, because, of course, that space we're seeing is being shut down all over the US. So public radio, for instance.
Yeah, this is, NPR and PBS, which are the public stations. For decades, Republicans have tried to get rid of them, but they, Newt Gingrich, Ronald Reagan, they've all kind of been pushed back by this idea of like, well, you don't want to kill Big Bird, because famously on PBS, that was the home of educational TV for people like Sesame Street, which is, about numbers and literacy. And finally, they have managed to do it. They have pulled the funding, about $1 billion, which is not very much in terms of, these large broadcast networks that run on part government-funded models as well. But this is going to, not just affect people in the US where these channels might disappear, and local radio in particular, which can be so important in times of emergencies or to keep people engaged with their local community. Across the West, regional and local media has died so heavily. I mean, I think it's fallen around 70 to 75% in the US in the last 2 decades. But it will also hurt programming overseas. The Voice of America radio, which transmits around the world, trying to give out, impartial, factual news and information to people in countries where you can't access that, a little bit like the BBC World Service aims to do, that is going to have to shutter in many locations. And we have already seen in places where it has pulled back, Russia and China move in and use the frequencies to broadcast their messaging as well. So then you're losing the soft power that you had. You're losing the world to, this altering, this sort of fake news, this all this kind of stuff.
And such a valuable tool for democracy. I mean, the station I used to work for, which broadcast sort of non-partisan news into Zimbabwe. Was so valuable to people there. And again, funded externally. Once those funds go, those people do not have that information.
Yeah.
Now, a huge amount of...
And it will drive them to social media where the news is not real.
Absolutely. Let's talk about not real news, because Donald Trump, here he comes again. Can we get through a program without mentioning that man's name?
I remember in 2015 when he started this, and it used to feel like an indulgence to mention him sometimes as a joke, and now we're just having because he just wants to
he dominates the news agenda
himself into everything, whether it's Coca-Cola, whether it's what you watch on TV. It is that classic sort of dictator-esque move, isn't it?
Absolutely. And of course, one of the sort of classic playbooks for dictators is shutting down freedom of expression and free speech, and particularly media. And there's another blow now where he's attempting to sue Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion. Now, this is something we discussed
Very
on
Dr. Evil, isn't it? $10 billion.
We discussed this on The Globalist yesterday. Excuse me. And it's about the lewd birthday card that he apparently sent to Jeffrey Epstein. The Wall Street Journal ran a story about this. I so wish they'd had a picture of it. I really want to see him scribbling his name over her pubic area, which is apparently what was done.
I think they must have done. They must have an image of it.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have run it.
Otherwise,
right?
they wouldn't have run it. There might be an issue with the copyright. Is my only thinking, is you can describe an image, but running it, there might be a copyright issue. But I'm going to show you some of Donald Trump's other sketches, because I've got to say, he's a decent little doodler. These are drawings that he has done previously. They're often of the New York skyline with his name scribbled quite centrally on them. There are other ones as well, including ones of like a money tree. But he used to do these doodles, and then he would give them to charities in New York, which would then auction them off. So I think yesterday was one of the worst days that he has had in terms of message control. I think he was somewhat in freefall. He came out and said, I don't write drawings, which is an interesting turn of phrase, when he clearly does do actually quite a little bit of drawing, and you just have to put in the words Trump sketches into Google, and you can see a number of these sketches that he's done. There's another one there of like the Brooklyn Bridge.
Wow. I mean, he's not bad.
Surprisingly not bad.
But I mean, here's the thing. If that kind of stuff is freely available online, it's also then very easy to take his style and his signature and fake something, I suppose. Quite
possibly. But I mean, it's in this book, though, that was given to Epstein, which included other messages. So someone would have had to have got hold of the book, created this fake, put it in. It seems very suspect. I mean, all I can say is on this story, the Wall Street Journal is a serious newspaper. You sort of might not like the sort of economic policies that it sort of advocates for, but it will not have done it. There's no way it didn't do its due diligence. Yeah,
and of course it has a history with Trump. Very recently, when it was the editor was inadvertently copied in to the WhatsApp group.
No, that was the Atlantic.
That was the Atlantic. I beg your pardon, but it has been criticising Trump.
Yes, it's been very over tariffs. It has gone, gangbusters criticising Donald Trump in terms of his tariff plans. But I mean, this is really interesting because it's not just targeting the newspaper and the journalists; it is targeting Rupert Murdoch himself. And last night, I was just very curious. I used a VPN to watch some Fox News, and it wasn't there. Now, Fox News is obviously owned by Rupert Murdoch's corporation, News Corp. And it's so fascinating because, the rise of Donald Trump would not have been possible without Fox News becoming a cheerleader, some say becoming state media. And then this story, which involves their proprietor, Rupert Murdoch, but their biggest star, Donald Trump, and they seemingly don't know what to do. They don't know how to cover it. When it was, wall-to-wall coverage on CNN and other US networks, because he really looks in a difficult spot with this. His base, which, were captured somewhat by the QAnon, by Pizzagate first, which I think many people argue was sort of Russian sort of psyop to take down Hillary Clinton, preying on the sort of oldest, worst lie you can say about someone, that they're, a paedophile or abusing children. That morphed then into QAnon via online culture. And Epstein, speaking to one expert I spoke to this week about conspiracy theory, says that Epstein has become the repository and somewhat the sort of cleaner version of QAnon, safer, because you sound less ludicrous. If you're talking about QAnon, you sound pretty mad. But if you're talking about Epstein, there is something genuinely there.
Yeah.
It's become this catch-all. And there is no getting away. And I had to do a piece this week looking at the timeline of Trump and Epstein. They met in the late 80s, close friends throughout the 90s, both had homes in Mar-a-Lago. Trump repeatedly flying on his private jet known as the Lolita Express, even taking his then wife Marla Maples and Tiffany, describing him in 2002 as a terrific guy, but he liked the woman on the young side. And they were friends all the way up until around 2004, when they seemed to have fallen out over a property deal. And then he goes down for the first time in 2008. Donald Trump has tried so hard to distance himself. And probably we think there are a lot of images and videos around of the two of them, but we think has bought up the copyright of more to stop them getting out.
Yeah.
It is going to be really tricky for him because his own mob is coming for him on this.
Yeah.
They are very taken by it.
It's extraordinary, and this is something that could really split the party, I think.
Really, yeah. And if you're J.D. Vance, I think you're waking up thinking this morning, okay, I'm the heir apparent. He's telling me to go out there and say, last year, we need the Epstein declassified, we need all of this. And now he's telling me, oh, I've got to say nothing to see here, no problem at all. Sure, boss. And how does he keep himself clean in this if he wants to run?
And then all these throwing of dead cats on the table, like the Coca-Cola story or whatever.
Coca-Cola, yeah, exactly.
Listen, I just want to get through one more media story because I find this completely fascinating. And this is the fact that the New York Times is revamping its lineup of arts and entertainment critics. It's replacing 4 of the paper's critics over TV, music and theatre. They've been given different jobs. But this is because, it's absolutely fascinating. They're saying that people don't need that kind of review anymore. So they're saying that they're looking for critics now to just do this in a different way. They say we're in the midst of an extraordinary moment in American culture. New generations of artists and audiences are bypassing traditional institutions. Smartphones have balkanized fandoms, even as they've made culture more widely accessible than ever. And so they're talking about covering arts in a different way. And you've got these hugely esteemed and respected critics now being bumped off because people just want to know what people are watching on TikTok.
I mean, yeah, it is. I'd say it's because we're no longer in a monoculture.
Yeah.
And monoculture moments feel really weird now and out of place. I mean, the last one I can think of would be the Taylor Swift Eras Tour that sort of, traveled the world. It had cross appeal. It's very rare to get an artist like that. Even Beyonce has kind of struggled to, with some of the work she's done recently to keep her kind of fandom intact. But it's very little now that we sort of, really share around the world in terms of TV moments. That's why things like in Europe, Eurovision feels so different, that you've got this sort of mass thing that you have to tune into live in the way that, you do with sport and in culture. And what's really interesting, I think, is what I found recently is whenever I sort of got into a new TV show, so, for instance, I watched the brilliant Andor recently on Disney Plus, which it is part of the Star Wars universe. You cannot have watched a single moment of any other Star Wars and watch this show, and it's fantastic. It's by the guy that did the Bourne Identity films. It's it's like Le Carré-esque. But my algorithm seemed to detect that I was watching this show, and then I was just being served on either YouTube or Instagram these creators who were sort of dissecting it and critiquing it and doing comparisons. And I've noticed that with other shows when I've been watching The White Lotus, all of a sudden you get these sort of online critics who are sort of taking you through what scene by scene, what it means, or picking up something that wasn't. And so we're all in these little silos that it's very hard to have these like catch all critics that can talk about everything, because there is so much content out there and it is so siloed.
Yeah, I was very shocked by this story, I have to say. But new is good usually, and as the father in Muriel's wedding says, you can't halt progress.
Exactly.
Now, there's been progress in the publishing industry too, because there's a new chapter has just begun. This is a new independent publishing house. It's called Firefinch. It's founded by two of the industry's most respected figures, Kate Parkin and Margaret Stead. They've launched with a stellar author list and a clear mission to put authors first. So joining me to tell us more is Firefinch Managing Director Kate Parkin. Kate, hello to you.
Hello.
Please tell us, how did Firefinch begin?
Well, we had both Margaret and I have a career working in big publishing houses, and we had long thought it would be interesting to do something much smaller. Independent publishing as part of the bigger ecosystem is really thriving, and there are some amazing independent publishers out there. And some authors are individuals. They're very different. Some of them want the heft of a big organisation, and others want a more bespoke, sort of personal relationship with their publishers. And that was what we felt we could and do offer at Firefinch. So a very sort of cooperative space where authors feel they really have a voice.
Are you an all-woman team?
We are, yes, and publishing is quite it is largely run by women, and has always had a very strong sort of female workforce. Not always running things, but the majority of publishers have been or are women. But that's not to say we're expanding, and we're looking forward to hiring people right across the spectrum. But for the moment, we're an all-women team.
And tell me about launching a new independent publishing house in this current climate.
Well, you're right to wave flags about the climate, and it was interesting listening to your previous item about the fragmentation of the media in general and in people's reading choices. Publishers are only ever a reflection of the tastes of the people who are acquiring those authors. So when we set out to think about who we wanted to publish and why we wanted to publish them, they were very personal choices. And in almost every case, the authors that we are publishing on our launch list are people we've worked closely with before. We're expanding, we're beginning to reach out and find new authors, and that's a very important part of our mission, is to bring new voices into the marketplace. But that sort of trust, that network, that feeling of that here's someone you could really work with together, and that it is it is a sort of collaborative enterprise is really important to us.
So tell me, Kate, who are you publishing?
Well, we're starting with a launch list of 7 authors in next year. It always sounds, when people think about publishing, it always sounds as if it takes a very long time to get a book out to market, but there's an awful lot that needs to happen to make sure it goes out in the best possible way, and in a way that will help it find the audience it deserves. So we are publishing 7 books next year, and we're publishing 6 novels and 1 work of non-fiction. And we're kicking off with our work of non-fiction, which is called The Secret History of the Universe, by a wonderful writer called Jonathan Black, who had a massive hit with his Secret History of the World, which looked at world history really through the lens of ancient wisdom. And he has done a great deal of work and is very interested in the ideas of the latest scientific thinking around quantum and quantum entanglement, and has drawn that together again with ancient wisdom. And a lot of the scientists that he's talking to, and scientists in the past who worked on this, are very, very close to some of these extraordinary ideas that come out of myth and legend. So that's a very exciting book for us, and I think we're already, we announced it 10 days ago, we're already getting sort of engagement from readers who want to know more. So we're very pleased with that. We're absolutely delighted to publish Christy Lefteri, who is a writer whose Beekeeper of Aleppo in particularly sort of highlighted the whole refugee experience. And she has the most extraordinary knack of being able to take an individual story and use it to highlight a much, much bigger issue. And she is her new novel is going to be set in the world of women's football, but looking at the very origins of it, which all took place in the First World War, when men were in the trenches. Women's football began to, really take off, and huge. I mean, thousands of people came to watch. The minute those men who did come back came back, no woman was allowed to play on an FA ground again until I think the sort of 80s, really.
Kate, I'm afraid we're running out of time, but can you tell us when are we going to be able to see the first of your published works?
June 2026. And in fact, we've just got a late entry, which is going to appear in February 26. I Am You by Victoria Reddell. We're very excited to publish this extraordinary American writer. So it's all go, packed schedule for next year. And we can't wait to get cracking.
Excellent. Kate, thank you very much indeed. That was Kate Parkin, who's managing director of a new independent publishing house, Firefinch. Now, just before we go, Vincent McAviney is still with me. I think there's one more media story we really need to look at, because we mentioned this on The Globalist yesterday. It had just broken at that point. I don't know why I'm laughing. I mean, it's awful for everybody concerned, but tell us about the reminder that cameras really are everywhere.
Yeah, if you haven't caught the video yet of the purported workplace affair that was caught between a CEO and the head of HR at a US company at a Coldplay concert on a sort of kiss cam. The video is well worth the watch, and there's many parodies of it now with other people being sort of superimposed via AI. This couple, it seems, were both married to other people, have families. So there is obviously some awfulness at the core of it, but it is a reminder that cameras are really everywhere. And this will have devastating effects on both their lives. I'm very curious, because it's the US, if they will try to sue Coldplay in any way.
So this is a kiss cam. This is like, during the concert. During
the concert, they were sort of going around the audience, putting people up on screen. And Chris Martin does this thing where he sort of like does a little kind of free bass verse to the person, whoever they are, and the camera hits them. They're on the sort of jumbotron screens. The guy immediately, he's holding this woman from behind, immediately drops down like a child, like an ostrich, thinking, if I can't see them, they can't see me. The woman sort of turns around, and this got recorded and clipped and put online, and it has gone absolutely wildfire. I wonder if there is anything in the conditions of concerts, which I think will probably say, if you enter, you agree to be filmed, and you might end up being part of performance. But this sort of shows that it's very difficult in the modern world with phones everywhere to kind of conduct these kind of relationships. Absolutely. But the odds of this happening to them, I mean, it is quite remarkable.
But why do that in public? Anyway, listen, I just want to give you one tiny piece of, it's not gossip, it's sort of information, but really known information about Chris Martin, whose mother is Zimbabwean. I've known her for many years. Years ago, when I was doing voiceovers and radio and all of that in Harare, Chris Martin, who just left school, was an intern at the studio where I recorded.
Oh, wow. And now he's consciously uncoupling CEOs. What a journey.
There we go. Vinny, thank you so much for being on. That's all, sadly, we have time for on Monocle on Saturday. Thanks again to Vincent McAviney, also to Kate Parkin, and to our producer and studio engineer, Mariella Bevan. Monocle on Saturday will return next weekend. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thanks for listening.